For several weeks, Michael lived as if trapped in a nightmare. Every morning, he woke up to find new red marks on his arms, neck, and chest. The itch was nearly unbearable and reminded him constantly that something strange was crawling on his skin at night. He tried everything he could think of, washing his sheets in hot water, vacuuming every corner of his room, and spraying over-the-counter bug spray, but the bites kept coming. Michael was convinced they were bedbugs. What else could it be after yet another sleepless night? Lying in bed one night, Michael stared at his mattress as if it were an enemy. Slowly, he pulled back the sheets in search of any sign of movement. No tiny insects, no blood spots, no bits of skin. Nothing that could prove the presence of bedbugs. Desperate for answers, he turned to the internet, hoping to confirm his suspicions, but every search pointed to the same culprit: bedbugs. The recommended methods all involved checking the mattress, inspecting the seams of the furniture, and setting up traps. Still, nothing worked. In a last-ditch effort to catch them in the act, Michael used his cell phone camera to record his bed while he slept. He carefully positioned the camera so that his pillow and everything around it was in clear view, then went to bed feeling uneasy yet determined. The next morning, when he reviewed the footage, nothing seemed out of place during the early hours. But around 3 a.m., he noticed something odd. His blanket shifted ever so slightly, as if something was crawling underneath it. He couldn't make out any clear shape, just a vague ripple. When he paused and zoomed in, no recognizable insect appeared, only an unsettling sense that something small or quick was there. Still that same day, Michael called an extermination service because he needed professional help. When the expert arrived, a middle-aged man named Brian listened patiently as Michael described the problem. Brian took notes, put on his gloves, and began a thorough inspection of the room. He shone a flashlight into every crack of the mattress, dismantled the bed frame, checked behind the headboard and along the baseboards, and even examined the rugs. After an hour, he shook his head and said, frowning, "I didn't find any sign of bed bugs." In confusion, he asked, "Are you sure the bites happen at night?" Michael rubbed his neck and replied, "Every morning, I wake up with fresh sores that itch like crazy, like bedbug bites." What else could it be? Brian sighed and scratched his chin. Sometimes, people mistake bites from other insects for bedbug bites. It could be fleas. Do you have any pets? Michael answered, disappointed. "I live alone. I don't have any pets and I haven't been out much. It's just these bites that never go away." With sympathy, Brian offered, "I can set up some professional traps. Let's see if we catch anything. If you don't mind, I'll leave them overnight and come back tomorrow." Michael agreed, holding on to a sliver of hope that the traps would catch some evidence of bed bugs and finally solve the mystery. That night, he tried to sleep again, knowing the traps were in place, but the itching returned as usual. The next morning, Brian came back to check the results. He looked perplexed and shook his head. There wasn't a single capture. "These traps are designed to lure bedbugs. If they were here, we should have caught at least one," he said, raising his eyebrows at Michael. Then he recommended that Michael see a dermatologist, suggesting that the bites might be due to a skin condition or another disorder that mimicked insect bites. Michael slumped. The last thing he wanted was another dead end, but he scheduled an appointment. At his visit, Dr. James examined the bite marks and performed a biopsy on an inflamed patch, promising to call back with the results as soon as they were ready, and prescribed a cream to ease the itching. For a moment, Michael hoped that maybe it was all in his head, but the marks were too clear and the itching at night too persistent for him to dismiss his doubts. He went home in a foul mood, determined to try the cream and wait for the test results to see if the bites would keep appearing. When Dr. James later called him back, Michael already sported new bites on his wrist and underarm. The doctor's cautious tone over the phone revealed that the biopsy showed inflammation, a typical reaction to insect bites, with no signs of any skin disease. "Something is literally biting you," Dr. James noted, sending a chill down Michael's spine. "Then why can't we find them?" Michael asked. After a pause, Dr. James sighed and suggested, "I recommend you see an entomologist, a specialist in identifying insects. I know it sounds odd, but maybe we're dealing with something different from bedbugs." I have a colleague who sometimes handles these mysterious cases. If you don't mind, I can arrange a consultation." Michael hesitated at the idea that his problem might be so unusual that it needed a specialist's attention, but eventually he agreed. A week later, Michael met Dr. Andrew, a well-known entomologist who frequently handled strange cases. With a calm and reassuring tone, Dr. Andrew said, "I understand you're going through a tough time." After reviewing the record from Dr. James, he asked, "Are you sure these bites only happen at your place?" Michael confirmed, explaining that he never gets new bites when staying at his parents' house or at a friend's. This only happens in his own room. Dr. Andrew tilted his head, intrigued. That suggests the source is in your environment. If it's not bed bugs, it might be something completely different. Let's take a close look at your sleeping area. He grabbed a small kit that included a magnifying glass, test tubes, and microscope slides, and headed back to Michael's apartment to conduct a detailed inspection with a flashlight and his magnifier. Dr. Andrew slowly examined the mattress, the bedding, and the bed frame. He collected tiny samples of dust and fibers from the seams of the mattress, sealing them carefully in small containers. He even gathered fragments of wood from the bed frame in a sample bag. Throughout the process, he said very little, only occasionally nodding his head. Michael watched him closely and noticed that at one point, Dr. Andrew grew tense when he lifted a corner of the mattress to inspect its underside. His brow furrowed slightly as he brought the magnifier closer and quickly removed his sample. Sensing that something significant had been found, Michael asked more insistently, "Did you see anything?" Dr. Andrew pressed his lips together and replied, "I'm not completely sure, but I did notice something unusual. I need to analyze the samples under the microscope before jumping to conclusions." Michael's heart sank. It meant another wait, another night of uncertainty. But he understood the need for careful investigation. Dr. Andrew left with the samples, promising to call as soon as he had an answer. That very night, Michael decided not to sleep in his room. He grabbed some freshly washed blankets and settled on the living room sofa, hoping that, away from his bed, the bites would stop. But when he woke up, besides feeling queasy, he found new red marks and welts on his ankle. He rubbed his irritated skin in alarm, thinking, whatever it is, it's spread beyond my bed. As he tried to figure out his next move, his phone rang. It was Dr. Andrew. In a firm and urgent tone, the entomologist said, "Michael, I need you to come to my lab right away." The urgency in his voice made Michael's stomach drop. "Is it bad?" he asked softly. "I'll explain everything when you get here," Dr. Andrew replied. Driving to the lab, Michael's mind raced. His hands were sweaty on the wheel as unsettling thoughts filled his head. Upon entering the small, sterile lab, he felt his nerves on edge. Dr. Andrew greeted him with a brief nod, but his expression was far graver than before. He pointed to a table where, under a powerful microscope, lay a small sample mounted on a slide. "These are the samples we collected from your mattress. Take a look," Dr. Andrew said. Michael leaned in and peered through the microscope's eyepiece. When he saw what was there, he recoiled with a gasp. At first, he saw what looked like dusty fibers, but soon he noticed tiny creatures, even smaller than the head of a pin. They had long, slender bodies with several pairs of legs. They weren't round and red like typical bedbugs. Instead, they were thin, quick, almost worm-like with tiny limbs. "What are these?" Michael whispered, his voice barely audible. Dr. Andrew adjusted his glasses and examined the sample carefully. With a calm and steady tone, he explained, "We've identified the species. There's no doubt about it. This insect is called Triatoma infestans." Michael's heart raced. "What does that mean?" he asked. Dr. Andrew sighed before answering. "It's a parasite commonly found in South America. They are known for their aggressive feeding habits and their remarkable ability to adapt. They feed on bodily fluids, and their bites mimic those of bedbugs." Michael felt a tightening in his chest and, with a trembling voice, asked, "How dangerous are they?" Dr. Andrew replied bluntly, "Very dangerous. They can cause severe skin lesions, infections, allergic reactions, and even transmit diseases through their saliva. They don't just bite, They build nests and reproduce in the cracks of your bed frame, maybe even in the walls. Every night, they come out to feed. They're practically invisible to the naked eye and mimic bed bug bites, so well that no one noticed them before. Michael felt a knot in his stomach, and trying to stay calm, he asked, "But how did they get here?" Dr. Andrew shook his head and suggested that they might have come in with imported furniture or even packages from abroad, since these parasites sometimes hitch a ride on shipments. "We need to act fast. I'll call in a specialized pest control team," he said. Later that same night, Michael sat in a corner of his living room while a group of pest control experts, fully equipped, entered his bedroom. Dr. Andrew accompanied them down the hall, pointing out the spots where he'd collected the samples. The team used a mix of techniques to eradicate the parasites, including a high-temperature treatment and a specialized chemical solution imported from an advanced research lab. The process was meticulous and tense, but in the end, the technicians confirmed that the infestation had been eliminated. When Michael finally returned to his apartment, it felt like stepping into a brand new place. The bed had been replaced, the walls repaired, and every surface thoroughly sanitized. Everything was now safe. A week later, Michael met with Dr. Andrew at the lab for one final checkup. The specialist explained that the creatures were most likely brought in with imported furniture bought at a discount warehouse a few months earlier. The larvae had adapted to the environment, multiplying quickly and feeding off the space every night. Michael's case had uncovered a new type of parasite that would now be monitored by experts around the world. Inspection procedures for certain imported products might be revised to prevent future outbreaks. If you've read this far, please leave a heart in the comments. Until next time, stay hopeful and take care.